What's up people on the internet, hope you have an amazing day. So my name's Kirsty, I have lived in Japan for about 5 months now and I'm getting a good feel of the area and location around me, and I've seen some other people struggle and they have left the teaching program and some who are thriving. So I thought I would make a video discussing things not to do if you are thinking to move into Japan, and hopefully should make your process a lot easier, and hopefully you shouldn't struggle and think I'm not enjoying living in Japan and I want to go home. Obviously for some people, they get here, there's a bit of a culture shock and sometimes they don't adapt, and that's absolutely fine. You know, if you are struggling and you're not enjoying it, then it's absolutely fine to quit. But there's some times where I think it could have been easily avoided if people did X, Y, and Z instead. So I'm just going to discuss some things that you should do, hopefully just to make the whole transition period a lot easier if you are planning on wanting to live in Japan. So let's go. So first things first, and I think this is the biggest thing that a lot of people do without realizing, is isolation. Do not, and I mean do not, isolate yourself when you move to Japan. Find someone to befriend straight away. I always like to make a joke that if I see another foreign person in my area and they live in the area, we are now automatically friends. That's the big thing. Just befriend people, go out with them, don't isolate yourself. If someone offers you an invite, especially when you first come here, say yes to everything. I mean, be a yes man. Once you've been here long enough and you have established some good friendships and networking routes, then you can start turning down things. But I think the second you move here, and if people are offering you to go to places, say yes all the time, just to build that kind of basic foundation of friends. And once you've built that foundation, you can start declining things, because there's a fine balance between saying yes and no, especially if you say yes too often straight away. Because I think when people are aware of new foreigners coming into their town, they are going to open a open arm and they're going to offer invitations, because they know how hard it is to move to another country. So they are going to be very welcoming and warming at the beginning. But if you say no too many times, then eventually people are just going to give up, because they just get into the mindset of, well, I've tried to invite this person to come out and hang with us and they've just declined too many times, so I'm not going to bother because I know it's going to be a no. Where if you keep saying yes at the beginning, you're always going to get an invite. And if you can't do it and you have to decline, that's fine. But I always think, say a valid reason to why you're declining, either of like, thanks for the invite, but someone has already booked me to go to this place instead, because then they will see it as, okay, that's fine, they're busy, rather than they don't want to hang out with me. So that's a really important thing. If you have to say no, make sure you put a reason to why, so you will still get offered an invite in the future. And especially I've seen some videos online of people who went to Japan, didn't like it, and they've made their video, and every time they've kind of ranted to why they haven't succeeded and why they left. And a lot of the time they've done some isolating subject. I remember watching one video saying like, these people would invite me and I didn't really like their interest, and all I wanted to do was stay home and study Japanese, which definitely in your free time do study Japanese, but trust me, you will learn much more Japanese going outside and trying to use the Japanese in person than rather sitting at home reading it in a book. The times I've gone outside and tried to practice it, I have definitely noticed my Japanese advances a lot more than sitting outside doing the book work. And sometimes people just have the wrong impression on friends they want to make. You know, I've seen some people and they're like, I'm going to come here and just befriend the Japanese because I have come to Japan and I want to befriend the locals. And then they avoid the whole kind of foreigners that are in the town that can speak their language. And I'm very confident if someone can speak English and they're in your town, befriend them automatically, because there's going to be times where you're going to have days where Nihongo is not computing, and you're just going to want days where you want to speak in your native language. So very important to do that. And sometimes with the Japanese people, you know, they are shy. Sometimes you have to make the first move, and if your Japanese isn't high enough as well, that's also going to be a problem. I really recommend, if you are someone who wants to befriend the locals, have a look in your area, see what kind of clubs and activities they are offering. If you can find a Japanese teacher in your local area, I think that's really helpful. I have a Japanese teacher in my area, and she's really nice. She takes me out to places and shows me things in the area, or also checking the local community. So I have my Japanese lesson, and in my city they do a weekly free Japanese lesson, and that always tends to be on different topics. So it's either, I've actually recently just come back from today's one, which was based on sickness and things to say if you're ill and you go to the doctor and how the whole medical process works. There's been ones on like the recycling and how that works here, and emergency disasters in the area. So those kind of ones are really good, because if you can find your local community one, that also shows you things that's in your area, and you will also befriend the Japanese that can speak somewhat English, so then you can have a perfect mixed combination of Japanglish where you're using both languages to kind of get an understanding, and you just build a good kind of Japanese friendship base there if you are wanting to befriend the locals, because that is definitely a thing you should do. But just don't forget the other foreigners in your area. Make sure you get a good blend of both. Don't isolate one another. Try and mix it up. So big one is communication. This is a really, really big one. And especially if you're thinking of being a language teacher out here, you are going to have to communicate. You are going to have to tell people what you want to do, what you're going to want to have for the lesson plan, or what you want to do in the lesson, or talk to your Japanese English teacher. Because there's so many people here that get here and they just sit at their desk and they go, well, no one's asking me to do anything, no one wants me to do anything. Where the Japanese teachers, they're pretty busy. Some people get here thinking they're going to get coddled, but the teachers, they've got their own things to worry about. So if there's something you want to do or discuss about the lesson or the work, you've got to talk to them. Don't just sit there and wait for someone to offer you things. You have to be the one offering. And that's also important if you also think for the social element, I don't get invited to anything, no one invites me to things. Be the offerer. Make a plan and do something and invite people in your area to hang out. I think this is a big thing people forget. You know, you can be the person who is the inviter rather than the invitee. And also going back to the work element, I think some people forget when they come and move to Japan that you are here to work. This is not a holiday. It's a bit of a mix. I see it as you have, one of the reasons you've obviously come to Japan is you're actually interested in the elements of the Japanese culture and you want to learn more. So you get to explore Japan when you're not working on the weekends and when it's like the school breaks. So that's your time to explore. But when it's not and it's work time, you are there to do a job. Make sure you do the job efficiently and don't be shocked off, oh, I have to do some work, because that is what we're here for. We are here to work and teach English. I think people forget that this is a type of employment and not a full-time holiday. So please make sure to remember you've come here for work foremost, and the exploring Japan and culture is the fun benefit of having this job. This one's a mixed one. This will come down to your personality in general, but there's a time and place to kind of have your daily events and rants about the job. You know, every job you do, you always go find something to rant and vent, and that's absolutely fine. You know, it's very cathartic. If there's something you don't like about the job, you need to have that good vent, which is absolutely fine. But there's a line between venting and moaning, and you don't want to move off the venting to moaning, because there's some people here where they moan too much and they compare it back to their home country. They will go, oh, my said country does this better than Japan, or my country does this better, or it's crazy how Japan doesn't have this thing yet, where in my country we have this yet. Where it becomes too much whinging and you go, well, why are you here? Why don't you stay in your country if you think your country is so much better than Japan? And you know, there is those kind of culture difference when you're going to be like, oh, my country does this, which Japan doesn't do. So I see this as like a culture difference. And that kind of statement is absolutely fine, because you're explaining it as a culture difference, where there will be people that will come off and explain it as a moaning element of, well, my country's better than Japan because it does X, Y, and Z. So make sure if you are going to do a comparison, make it sound more of a culture difference rather than saying my country's the best than this one, because people are going to get into an element of like, well, why are you here if you think your country is so much better? And that will also kind of, it won't isolate you from people, but people will start thinking, well, I don't want to hang out as much with this person because they always moan about things, or they always say how my country is better. And that's a big thing as well. Make sure you keep venting is venting and don't cross into the moaning, because if you moan too much, then people aren't going to want to hang out with you as much, because you just build that reputation of, I don't want to hang out with that person because they moan too much, and I ain't got the time for moaning, I've got better things to do. And then also watch out for this one. Again, this is going to be very much on your social background, but if you are a person who has been born into a very like high privilege, middle class, potentially rich family, if you had a silver spoon lifestyle, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. You can't help where you've been born and the roll of the dice of like the social status you have got. But I think if you are a person who has had a silver spoon in their mouth, make sure you are kind of really humble about that. Don't brag about too much about things, because again, this can slowly isolate you as well, or more just people might not want to hang out with you as much because you just come off very ignorant with some of the few things you have been blessed with. And people get very frustrated that they are moaning about some things that is actually something of really silver spoon kind of posh status. It's not the best feeling for people who haven't grown up with money or wealth, because they've seen the real life of like struggling and making sure you keep every last dime to the most useful thing. So I guess the biggest thing, if you are, be humble around the people you are, because not everyone has the same social status. And if you come off too kind of ignorant on a lot of the silver spoon status things you may have had in life, it may push people away not to hang out as much, because they just don't want to hear a lot of kind of posh privilege complaints. So that's kind of one thing to watch out if you are someone of a silver spoon status, because you know, this is not everyone. I've met many people who are kind of well off and they are very humble about it, but if you are not humble about it, then you are going to push people to not want to hang out with you as much, because they just don't want to hear a lot of posh privilege problems. So, you know, the biggest thing is you want to connect with people who have similar interests. And if you're already thinking of coming to Japan, especially the foreigners who's in Japan, you've already got a built interest already. One of my friends said something here which I think is very true. If you have come to move to Japan, you obviously struggle to make friends in your own country, so you've given up there and you've tried to make friends in Japan. And I think that's kind of very true. There's some element of kind of social awkwardness of like why you've left your country to come here. So if you're thinking of already moving here and you do it, you've already kind of established a great foundation, because every foreigner here had some interest about Japan. So you've already got that kind of good connection already. And then hopefully you should be able to build up from there. But yeah, those are my kind of few things to be aware if you're thinking of moving to Japan. And hopefully if you listen to my advice, then you should have an easier time settling in, and you won't want to think to end the program and leave really early, because you have to give it time as well, as a big thing. I think if you are struggling, give it at least 6 months before you decide to end your journey in Japan, because the first 6 months are going to be the hardest, because you know, you're settling in, you're having all these culture changes, you're adapting to hearing the language every day. You know, you've got to set up your house, your bills, your energy, your bank. So there's a lot of kind of admin stuff that can be quite stressful, that just adds to the whole journey and stress of moving here. So give it time, but if you are struggling, give it at least 6 months, because we did have one person who broke contract and they left in the first 3 months. And personally, I just think it's a little bit too short, where, you know, if you're struggling and you've had enough, that's absolutely fine. But give it the full 6 months, especially if you are thinking about doing teaching as well. Depending on the company you're with, if you break contract too early to when you start, one of the kind of like gravitas of teaching English and to get people to come here, the company will pay for your flight here, and then they'll pay for your flight back, and they'll also pay for the orientation straight away. But you have to make sure you stay here for about 6 months, because if you do break contract afterwards, you won't have to pay for the flight here and the flight back. But if you do break within the first 6 months, then you have to pay for your flight in and your flight back and the orientation. So especially that element as well. So making sure you don't overspend money, always give it 6 months in my opinion. But that's everything for today's video. If you found it useful, please leave it a like. If there's anything else you want to see related to Japan culture, then let me know in the comments down below. And I'll see you in the next Japan related video. Bye!